Okay, tonight is Mosiah, chapter 6.
And now King Benjamin thought it was expedient, after having finished speaking to the people, that he should take the names of all those who had entered into a covenant with God to keep his commandments. And it came to pass that there was not one soul, except there were little children, but who had entered into the covenant and had taken upon them the name of Christ.
Upon hearing the good reaction of all the people, so the king had a kind of an idea here. Records, all right? Let's write everybody's name down. Okay, let's get everybody's name written down. This way we have a record of what's happened here today, and we know that you've made that covenant, that commitment. And and you can see some of the benefit of that. Because talk is cheap, all right, and the verbal contract isn't worth the paper it's written on. I think is how we put it. All right, so this gives them the opportunity to write their names down. This way, it's recorded somewhere. So now they're putting it in writing what they've already agreed to. Right? Even though we believe that the change occurred, but yet it's good to have a record of that. And this way, also the king has a record of everybody who said yes, I'm going to serve you or serve God. As you can see, that once he did that, so how many people signed up, if you will?
All of them.
Right, all of them except the children, right? Because the children didn't need repentance, as we teach today. So all of the adults, those were old enough to understand. Every single one agreed to this covenant, so they all put their name on the paper, if you will, that they were going to be part of this church or part of the family of Christ.
And again it came to pass that when King Benjamin had made an end of all these things, and had consecrated his son Mosiah to be a ruler and a king over his people, and had given him all the charges concerning the kingdom, and also had appointed priests to teach the people, that thereby they might hear and know the commandments of God, and to stir them up in remembrance of the oath which they had made, he dismissed the multitude, and they returned every one according to their families to their own houses. And Mosiah began to reign in his father's stead, and he began to reign in the 30th year of his age, making in the whole about 476 years from the time that Lehi left Jerusalem. And King Benjamin lived 3 years, and he died.
Once this was done, and if you remember, that the king pulled everybody together to give this, what was going to be his last speech, and he said that he was no longer able to continue to be king, and that he was going to turn it over to his son Mosiah, right? And of course, written the names up here. Mosiah was the oldest and the one who would be the next king. Right, so upon completing the speech, of course, then he consecrates Mosiah to be the king and basically turns it right over to him. And as you can see, it says that King Benjamin lived only 3 more years till he died, so that clearly he knew he was coming to the end of his life. And he may or may not have been that old. We don't know how old he really was at this point, although I guess his son was 30, so I guess he was at least in his 50s by that time, maybe 60s. But we figured he must have had some kind of a disease that he knew was going to be fatal at some point, because he wasn't necessarily old, but he knew he didn't have that much longer to live, so he turned it over to his son while he was still able to, I guess, teach him and show him the ropes a little bit. Okay, so you see in verse 4, just a little bit about Mosiah, as he began to reign in the 30th year of his age, and it was 476 years from the time that Lehi left Jerusalem. Now, do you remember what year Lehi left Jerusalem? 600. Right, in the year 600 BC was when Lehi left Jerusalem. So if it's 476 years from that time, then if you do the math, then it becomes about 124 BC at the time that we're reading this, right? Which let's see, that's why we look at the top of the page. It says between 124 BC and 121 BC. Right, and that's where that comes from, right? And the reason there's a 3-year span, because what's on this page, right, started when the Mosiah took over in 476 years, that's 124 BC, and it says King Benjamin lived 3 years and he died. So 3 years have passed on this page, so that's why we have 124 to 121 BC, because this page covers a 3-year span. Okay? So the king turns over the kingship to Mosiah, and so now he's going to reign in his stead.
And it came to pass that King Mosiah did walk in the ways of the Lord, and did observe his judgments and his statutes, and to keep his commandments in all things whatsoever he commanded him. And King Mosiah did cause his people that they should till the earth, and he also himself did till the earth, that thereby he might not become burdensome to his people, that he might do according to that which his father hath done in all things. And there was no contention among all his people for the space of 3 years.
Just from those two, it's kind of giving a little introduction to Mosiah's term as the king. You can see that he was going to be a righteous king, right? Which is what the people need, right? They need a righteous king to lead them. And as was said, he was willing to work for himself as opposed to putting it on the other people. And And whose example was he following in that?
His father.
His father's, right? Because if you remember the earlier chapters, King Benjamin described to the people how he had done the same thing, right? That he had taken care of himself and worked for himself and not burdened the people with a lot of taxes or things to support him, but rather he worked for himself, as this way he was working alongside the other people that way. So he was following that example. Says he have a good example, and you follow the good example. So that's Mosiah was a positive role model as a king also. And you see for the firch 3 years, which covers these same 3 years, says there was no contention among all his people. In other words, everybody was happy, everybody was peaceful in peace, and so that's a great job as the king. Now they all converted the same day, and so yeah, at that point certainly they were all wanting to live a better life, because then everybody, right? And then the whole kingdom came out, so this was everybody in the kingdom, however big it was. So yeah, it made sense that for some period of time they would live in peace. And I'm sure as Sir Angela said, for the time that the king was still alive, it's like I saw all of you write your name down, so we expect good behavior now, and so yeah, they were all on good behavior for those 3 years certainly.